John Denver. October 12, 1997, Monterey Bay, California. The afternoon light is doing that thing it does on the Pacific coast. Warm, golden, almost unbearably peaceful. And somewhere out over that water, a small experimental aircraft is nosediving toward the surface at catastrophic speed. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., the man the whole world knew as John Denver,
Hey guys.
had been spending the afternoon doing touch-and-go landings at Monterey Peninsula Airport. He'd recently bought himself a Rutan Long-EZ, a sleek little home-built plane with the registration N555JD, and he was logging hours. The weather was fine, visibility was good. There was no distress call, no Mayday, nothing on the radio that suggested anything was wrong. That silence is actually part of the problem. The Long-EZ had a quirk, and not a minor one. The previous builder had repositioned the fuel selector valve, the lever you use to switch between fuel tanks, to a spot directly behind the pilot's left shoulder. To reach it, you had to physically twist your torso, take your attention away from the controls, and reach backward into the cockpit. Mid-air. At low altitude. Over open water. The NTSB concluded that's exactly what John was doing in the final seconds of his life. He needed to switch tanks, reached back for the lever, his body turned, pressure on the controls shifted, and the plane pitched into a sudden, steep, nose-down dive. He was flying too low to recover. He had maybe 3 to 5 seconds of awareness that something had gone catastrophically wrong before the Long-EZ hit the surface of Monterey Bay. Water at that speed is concrete. The plane didn't sink gracefully, it disintegrated on impact. The autopsy confirmed death by multiple blunt force trauma, which is the clinical way of saying he almost certainly didn't suffer after the moment of impact. He was 53 years old. He died alone in a tiny cockpit because someone had moved a lever a few inches too far to the left. The NTSB pointed the finger squarely at the aircraft's builder for the dangerous ergonomic design. William Holden. November 12, 1981. A Santa Monica apartment building. Inside one of the units, the lights are dim. A bottle is mostly empty, and one of the biggest stars in Hollywood history is about to trip over a rug. William Holden had been, for a stretch of decades, genuinely untouchable. Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, the bridge on the River Kwai, The Wild Bunch, an Oscar, multiple nominations, box office gold. By the early 1980s, though, the roles had thinned and the drinking had not. He was 63, living alone, and by all accounts, spending more and more evenings exactly like this one, in his apartment with a bottle of scotch and not much else. On that particular night, the autopsy would later confirm he was significantly intoxicated. He stumbled, slipped most likely on a throw rug, and went down hard. His forehead connected with the sharp corner of a teak nightstand. The laceration was deep. The bleeding was immediate and serious. Here's where it gets genuinely awful. Coroner Thomas Noguchi's reconstruction of events suggested that William remained conscious for at least 30 minutes after the fall. 30 minutes of lying on the floor of his own apartment, blood pooling around his head, likely too disoriented from alcohol and blood loss to get himself up, too far from the phone, maybe trying and failing to find purchase on something, the edge of a table, the wall, to drag himself upright.
Help me!
The medical reality of that half hour is grim to sit with. As blood pressure drops, confusion sets in fast. The room gets darker at the edges. The body gets heavy. There's a point where a person stops trying to stand and just lies there, breathing shallowly, the fight running out through the floor with the blood. Hypovolemically, his system simply gave out. He wasn't found for 4 days. It was November 16th when someone finally checked on him, and by then the apartment had told its own quiet story. No struggle, no sign of anyone else, just a rug, a nightstand, and the most preventable death you can imagine. Noguchi ruled it an accident, which it was, technically. But alcohol turned a stumble into a slow, lonely execution, and nobody was there to stop it. Glenn Ford. There's a particular kind of cruelty that Hollywood reserves for the people it once adored. It doesn't fire you. It doesn't exile you. It just stops calling. Glenn Ford knew this cruelty well by the time his body gave out on August 30th, 2006, in his Beverly Hills home. He was 90 years old. He had spent the last decade and a half largely alone, largely in pain, and largely forgotten by the industry that had once made him its highest-paid actor. His career had been extraordinary. Gilda, 3:10 to Yuma, Superman, for heaven's sake. He played Jonathan Kent. But starting in the early 1990s, a series of small strokes began quietly dismantling the man from the inside out. Each one took something. A bit of mobility here, some fine motor control there, a layer of independence. He started using a wheelchair. Then he became largely housebound. Reports from people close to him described how he spent his days, watching his own old films in his living room, writing letters back to fans because the fan mail was one of the few consistent signs that the world remembered he existed. Meanwhile, a string of divorces and financial decisions over the decades had eroded his fortune. The Beverly Hills address was still there, but the life inside it was threadbare and solitary. The medical picture in his final years was relentless. Multiple strokes leave lasting neurological damage. Stiffness, partial paralysis, neuropathic pain that doesn't resolve between episodes. On August 30th, 2006, another cardiovascular event hit him at home. A major stroke arrives fast. A sudden violent headache, one side of the body going slack, speech dissolving. In a man already weakened by years of smaller episodes, the ability to call for help would have been nearly gone. Natalie Wood. The weekend of November 27th to 29th, 1981, Catalina Island, California. A luxury yacht called the Splendor is anchored offshore, rocking gently in cold November water. On board, Natalie Wood, her husband, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis DeVerne. It should be a relaxing getaway. It is emphatically not. Natalie Wood was one of the most recognizable women in American film. Miracle on 34th Street as a child, Rebel Without a Cause as a teenager, West Side Story as a young woman. By 1981, she was 43, still working, still luminous, and reportedly in the middle of some real tension with Wagner over her career choices and her closeness with Walken, her co-star on the film they just wrapped. Saturday the 28th was a day of drinking. The group went ashore for dinner, more drinking. Witnesses later described a charged, uncomfortable atmosphere in the restaurant. Around 10:30 that night, they headed back to the Splendor. Whatever mood had built up during the day came back on the boat with them. Sometime around midnight, or shortly after, an argument erupted between Natalie and Wagner in the salon. According to DeVerne's later account, it was ugly. Natalie left the group and went to her cabin. Then, at some point, wearing a flannel nightgown, wool socks, and a short down jacket, she came back up to the rear deck, alone, in the dark. The water temperature was around 63 degrees Fahrenheit. The air was colder. What happened next is the part that has never been fully, cleanly resolved. The official reconstruction, accepted for decades, was that she went to the stern, tried to do something with the small rubber dinghy tied there, lost her footing on the wet deck, and fell overboard. Her blood alcohol content was 0.14. She was wearing clothes that, once waterlogged, would have dragged her down. Drowning is not peaceful. Panic sets in within seconds. She would have been fighting the water, fighting the weight of her soaked jacket and nightgown, hyperventilating, taking in water. In those temperatures, with that level of intoxication, cognitive and physical function degrades fast. 10 to 20 minutes. That's the window. Her body was found hours later floating near the island, the dinghy nearby. The coroner noted bruising on both arms, a wrist, a knee, a scrape on the neck and forehead. Injuries that a 2012 review declared undetermined in origin, changing the official cause of death from accident to drowning and other undetermined factors. The case was reopened. Wagner was named a person of interest. No charges have ever been filed. Vic Morrow, July 23rd, 1982. Indian Dunes, near Valencia, California. It's past midnight, a night shoot on the set of Twilight Zone the movie, directed by John Landis. They're filming a Vietnam War sequence. There are explosions. There's a helicopter flying low over a shallow, artificial lagoon. And two child actors, ages 6 and 7, are on set illegally at 2 in the morning. Vic Morrow was a solid, respected character actor. Combat on television, a long career of tough guy roles. That night, he was running through the water in the scene, holding both children in his arms. Above him, pilot Dorsey Wingo was flying the helicopter at very low altitude, while the special effects team detonated explosives below. Someone miscalculated, catastrophically. The explosives were either too powerful or placed too close to the aircraft. The blasts destabilized the helicopter. Wingo later testified that he felt the vehicle change, felt the vibration shift, felt the controls go wrong. The tail rotor was compromised. The aircraft began to spin and descend, rapidly and uncontrollably, directly toward the 3 people standing in the water below. Wingo said afterward that Morrow had more than 5 seconds to see what was happening above him and react. Vic Morrow and Micah Din Lay, the 7-year-old boy, were killed almost instantaneously. The injuries consistent with decapitation. The 6-year-old girl, Renee Shin-Yi Chen, was crushed by the fuselage. 3 people dead in seconds. The whole thing was captured on camera because this was a film set and the cameras were rolling. John Landis, Wingo, and several others were charged with involuntary manslaughter. In 1987, after a lengthy trial, all of them were acquitted. The public reaction was, to put it diplomatically, not warm. Civil suits resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements for the victims' families. Morrow's daughter, actress Jennifer Jason Leigh, received a settlement from Warner Brothers. Olive Thomas, September 5th, 1920. The Hotel Ritz, Paris, France. Suite with a marble bathroom. The kind of room that makes you feel like the world is entirely, permanently yours. Outside, Montparnasse at 3 in the morning, the city still humming from the night's festivities. Inside, a bottle of liquid sitting on the bathroom shelf, labeled in French, in the dark, in a hotel room belonging to 2 people who are very, very drunk. Olive Thomas was a Ziegfeld Folly showgirl turned silent film star, beautiful in the particular luminous way the early film era demanded. Young, married to Jack Pickford, brother of Mary Pickford. She and Jack were in Paris on what was supposed to be a second honeymoon, a reconciliation of sorts after a rocky stretch in their marriage. They had been out that night. They had been drinking. They came back to the Ritz in the early hours of the morning, unsteady and happy and not paying close attention to anything. In the bathroom, on the shelf near the sink, was a bottle of solution. It belonged to Jack. It contained mercuric chloride, bichloride of mercury, an extremely toxic antiseptic used at the time to treat syphilis sores. The label was in French. Olive's French was limited at the best of times, and this was far from the best of times. She picked up the bottle. She took a drink. Maybe she thought it was water, maybe a sleeping draught. Jack ran to her. He read the label. He understood immediately what had happened and called frantically for a doctor, tried to make her vomit, tried to get water into her. Olive was rushed to the American hospital in Neuilly-sur-Seine, where she spent the next 5 days dying slowly and in extraordinary pain. Mercuric chloride doesn't kill quickly. It burns the mouth, throat, stomach, intestinal lining. Then it attacks the kidneys. Acute nephritis sets in, the kidneys shut down, and the body begins to poison itself with its own waste. She would have drifted in and out of consciousness, periods of agonizing clarity alternating with delirium. A graying, swollen, chemically scorched version of herself lying in a hospital bed while Jack and others kept vigil. She died on September 10th, 1920. She was 25 years old.